Aqui, agora, eu falo em nome de uma comunidade de mais de 100 pessoas.
Now I'm talking from a community of more than 100 people.
Mulheres,
Women,
crianças,
children,
jovens
youngs,
e idosos que circulam
and elders that are circulating
por nosso chão.
In our ground.
Falo em nome também de tantas outras Yalorixás
I also talk on behalf of many other Yalorishas
que, como eu,
that are like me,
cuidam de pessoas inteiras
take care of many people
a partir das beiradas do sistema.
from the peripheries of the system.
Falo principalmente pelas mulheres
I talk mainly on behalf of the women
que não estão mais aqui para falar.
that are not here anymore to talk.
Acho que o feminicídio calou.
The feminicide has
Acho que a fome derrotou.
The hunger defeated.
Acho que a guerra urbana apagou dos mapas.
The ones that the wars, the urban wars has erased from the maps.
Minha esperança nesse encontro
My hope in this gathering, this meeting,
é que nós possamos reconhecer
is that we can acknowledge
que não há justiça de gênero sem justiça racial.
that there is no gender justice without
E que não há
racial
justiça
justice.
possível
And there is no possible justice
sem ouvir as vozes das mulheres negras
without listening to the
dos territórios.
voices of the black women from the territories.
Que as políticas globais se lembrem que nós não queremos só sobrevivência.
The policies, the world policies should understand that we don't want just to survive.
Queremos dignidade,
We want dignity,
floresta em pé,
forest,
comida no prato,
food on our
direito à cultura,
right to the
ao sagrado
culture,
e ao lazer.
leisure.
Cidades que respeitem nossas casas e corpos inteiros para criar nossos filhos em paz.
Cities that respect our bodies and our homes as a whole, so we can create our sons in peace.
Eu sei que muitos devem estar perguntando o que seria um terreiro abolicionista.
I know that many of you can be asking yourselves, so what is a terreiro abolitionist terreiro?
E tem um escritor,
There's a writer,
chamado Muniz Sodré.
His name is Muniz Sodré.
Que ele diz assim:
Quote,
eu enxergo o terreiro
I see the terreiro
como instituição abolicionista
as an abolitionist
que
institution
reinventa a vida negra frente ao racismo.
that invent new forms of the black lives facing the racism.
Esse foi um dos pilares que nos moveram, além da visita da queridíssima Ruth em nosso espaço, que foi
That's one of the
inesquecível.
The things that is on the base of their thinking, and also the visit that Ruthie did in 2024 at their
e
place
provocador.
Well. And that was very provoking.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, comrades. Well, in terms of Abahlali becoming or joining a political party, I don't think it's for me to kind of answer that, other than to say, well, it is through the day-to-day thinking of ordinary men and women and men who are members of Abahlali to kind of make that decision. It is a conversation that is ongoing. It was even heightened last year when the election times, for instance, become your opportunity to use it as a tool to send the Abahlali demands and to make sure that the issues that affect Abahlali are centered. We've had several conversations. How do we use the election moment as a tool that can actually not only advance but consolidate the struggle? So I can safely say we are in a moment of gymming, gearing ourselves, consolidating the power of the working class and the impoverished in order to get to a point where we can discuss what Ngoskona has raised yesterday. But definitely we have tried to navigate this question. We just did not want to be a coward. We've made many mistakes, but the conclusion in as far as your question is concerned, Abahlali, we're now clear that we are no longer going to donate our power. We have worked hard to consolidate the power that we have, but then to simply hand it over to the reds or the blues and the whites, we've learned our lessons. We've made many mistakes. We are not just perfect movement, but at least we are brave to make decisions because there are lessons from there. So, but for now, the discussion is that we can no longer work hard and then suddenly donate the power. And that power gets used against us. It's been happening for quite a while, so we've learned that. Now, the second question, Comrade Siviwe, my legal advice to comrades here in Cape Town and maybe elsewhere is that as comrades, as leaders, as activists, as organizations, as movements, we got to know our constituencies. We must study the people we claim to lead. If you don't know the people that you lead, you have not passed the test. You don't lead something that you don't know. Know your constituency. Build a very strong foundation. I was very impressed by the uncle that spoke here this morning, who spoke about families and strong family values, not in a patriarchal way, because some people, and maybe in the US, it is misunderstood. But if you want to build a society, you got to make sure that the family values and foundation are got correctly. Not only your family, know your neighbor, your neighborhood, your city, your province, your state, your country, and the world. You cannot become an internationalist here when you do nothing back at home. We have seen wonderful platforms like this that are used as a slogan for people to be seen to be saying the right things, but they have not gotten their basic rights. What you say to us must not only reflect it in your words, but into your day-to-day action. So I'm calling for comrades to be truthful to themselves. Comrades must be honest. When they are engaged in struggle, they must not be engaged in struggle because they want to impress certain comrades, certain organization. It is a conscious choice. So it is very imperative that we get it right from the beginning. We build very strong foundation in our movements. We build unity between and struggling communities. It is very important that you recognize that without your comrades, you are nowhere. And without your community, you cannot, survive many storms that we are confronted with. So that is my legal advice, that we need one another, we need each other, and we need to strengthen every capacity and be able to identify allies, the right allies, and work also in collaboration with others, because that's how we learn. So Abahlali are where we are because we've built the Poor People's Alliance in Durban. Today we are part of the Durban Coalition, which really brings the whole range of, communities and individuals into the conversation, because we have accepted that we are on our own. So I think that is very important, that we identify allies that we are going to work with. The journey is very bumpy and hard, so we can no longer afford to work in isolation. To conquer the world will require all of us to work together in order to build a movement of movements. My conclusion, comrades, is that it is important that we go out, not only talk about the revolution that would one day come and we start acting in accordance with. The things that we talk about here have to be reflected in our day-to-day thinking, into our day-to-day action. We can't be talking something here and then when we go out, we become something else. So that is the only way we're going to humanize the world. Let us be truthful to ourselves. Once again, thank you so much.
Okay, now you may come forward if you wish and have a book signed, purchase a book, and have it signed. Also, we have lunch, and everybody is welcome. It is lunch for everybody. And then our session that was to have started at 14 will start at 15, 3 p.m. Okay? So enjoy the break.
Thank you.
And come forward and spook.
So comrades, thank you, Comrade Ruthie. The lunch is one floor up. Where you came in, there's a bookstore. Grab your books on the way out. It might be better to sign up there because you can't pay because of the internet. So go upstairs. You walk all the way down the corridor. The food is on your right, and you can sit anywhere in the building if you want to sit outside. Comrade Wangui, who is flying in from Kenya, is in the passport control line. She says, the shuttle says they'll get her here before we start our panel at 3 o'clock. So we'll see you back here at 3. Thank you so much. And a reminder, there are 2 books. One is Comrade Sibu's book, which he spoke very little about, and one is the Abahlali book. So buy both.
I believe there's another person coming, but they're still on their way.
No, she arrived.
Oh, fantastic.
Hello, everybody. Can we make our way to our seats? It's post-lunch chaos. Okay. We are just waiting for Comrade Wangui, who's landed from Kenya and outside the door. Can those of you on the edge either sit down or find a seat? We're about to begin. Oh, this is yours. This one is yours. Okay. If you look on your tables or you take out the paper we handed out earlier, you'll see the bios of the comrades on our second panel. Is Priscilla here? You all good? Comrade Nisrin Elamin on the end. Comrade Sibu Zikode, who we were talking to earlier. Comrade Rawan Masri and Comrade Wangui Kimari, who just landed, comrades, from the airport to the panel. Welcome. So our second and last panel for the day is focusing on how we continue radical work in the face of violent backlash. Again, if you want the detailed bios, please have a look on the page. We're not going to waste time introducing in detail. So we've asked the panelists to answer two questions. Firstly, to answer the question, can you describe for those in the room, assuming that some of us don't know, the context as well as the backlash of the place you are speaking from? And we'll go in this order, and then we'll come around again for a second question. So
I will stand as has been happening with the previous panels. I'm going to share two parts of a Lenin quote. The first part I will share now when talking about the context of repression, and the second part on how we are resisting that repression. Lenin, in the aftermath of Tolstoy's death, he wrote this about Tolstoy's description of the Russian peasants, but as reading it, I felt it might as well have been written today and could be very easily applied to the Palestinian masses. He was describing how Tolstoy managed to capture what he said that was their alienation from political life, their desire to keep aloof from the world, a non-resistance to evil, and impotent imprecations or curses against capitalism. And these words stood out to me because this might surprise most to hear me say this about Palestinians. It's not that Palestinians are not political. It's not that they don't understand that the occupation is their enemy. But I think that we are in a very dangerous place of despair and feelings of impotence, as he said. So I am from the West Bank in Palestine. It differs from Gaza in the way that the occupation shows its face, rather than the outright genocidal onslaught and bombardments from afar. We have mass arrests, settler violence, which is, pogroms really, where settlers come and uproot olive trees and attack, shoot people while the army allows them. And this is accompanied by a permit regime. It's not very easy to get to different parts of Palestine. And it's accompanied by checkpoints where, in comparison to Birzeit University, where I am currently studying, you have a classroom full of people who it was a miracle that they could even make it in, and who will be rushing to make it home before dark, before the settlers are most at their ruthless. So it is this context, and it's what I need to mention here as well is that while this is occupation, for us, we have the Palestinian Authority, which can be understood as a Bantustan and understood as the subcontractor of the occupation, in that they are working with the occupation to target resistance, to profile and arrest activists, and to make protests no longer happen, and using the language of, do you want us to be like Gaza? So we see how this display of violence that we have seen is also meant to be a cudgel to scare anyone from resisting, and to present it as a false choice, where it's as if you decided to stay home, if you decided to try to eke out this life under occupation, it will not eventually come for you. When what we've seen as happened in Gaza, it's not that everyone who was killed were activists or did something, between quotes, to deserve the violence that was meted out to them. But this is the inevitable logic of Zionism. They will not be happy until they have as much of the land as possible with as few as the Palestinians left on it. And just a quick last word about when I say they're targeting activists, they both have this logic of, a very patriarchal logic, for example, where I think it's, mirrors of how the occupation is now arresting more women, acting more. There's more sexual violence being enacted in the prisons. There was a pregnant woman who was in the prison who was being threatened with having to give birth in that prison. And specifically one story of a woman in Gaza who, as she was displaced and walking, the soldiers stopped her and forced her to give her children to a stranger, and they took her. The other side of this is how the Palestinian Authority, when there are arrests, when the West Bank is trying to show that, we do not see ourselves as a separate people from Gaza. We don't see it as, oh, we got lucky. We're trying to do something for them. They were targeting female activists specifically, using the language of family honor and looking for phones to try to find photos to blackmail and incriminate. So this is kind of the suffocating atmosphere that we are seeing, in addition to how there are salary cuts. There is an actual issue of impoverishment, and how this is, again, trying to take us to a situation where I would argue, and maybe my comrades will agree with me, in that we don't see accelerationism as, this idea that if things just get so terrible, everyone will have no choice but to rise up. I think we see the opposite, where if things get so terrible, people will barely survive, and people can only focus on surviving, and you disintegrate even the most intimate family ties, because if your children are in prison, if your family members are killed, they try to extinguish that even fire in you that wants you to continue to fight. So I think that's the kind of dire circumstances that we are seeing.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for letting me come late. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. I know some people here because I was a very bad employee of University of Cape Town a few years ago. So I see Anna and others. So it's nice to be here. And it's also nice to meet other comrades. Boa tarde, o povo brasileiro. Tudo bem? Tudo. Eu sou queniana, mas eu falo português para uma razão bem doida. Eu te conto depois, viu? Thank you. Nice to be here. And I feel very grateful also for the lunch. Thank you. And I look forward to the inspiration. So I'm from Kenya. Anyone been to Kenya? What are you? I'm just sorry, this is the teacher in me, but what do you know about Kenya? Anyone? Anyone, anything? Okay, cool. Runners even? Anything? Corredors? What'd you say? Yeah? Coffee? Corredors? See? Cafe? Sorry? Mathare? Dirang Kimabi? Great. So, Odinga? Ah, great. Yeah, the senior one. Anything else? Youth uprising. So thank you for saying that, actually, Kelly, because I was going to say we're emerging from a context of really powerful Gen Z uprisings. Last year, over 1 million young people took to the street. They shamed old middle-class people like me to do more. It was great. But I think, sadly, it also illustrated that Kenya is an assassin and disappearance state, unfortunately. So many young people were killed. The only thing they said was Shega, enough. Where what prompted those protests, I mean, it's always many reasons, was a tax bill that was going to tax diapers, bread, electricity. So that's what was the initial spark, but coming from a longer fire of Mau Mau, a longer fire of Wangari Maathai, much longer fires. But that was a spark from that. So people take to the street, but now we are at an impasse in some ways. People are organizing at an impasse partially because so many young people were shot. But people are still organizing. And I need to say that the violence of the Kenyan state, which is very shit, I'm sure most of you know, is not just in Kenya, it's in Haiti, because we send troops to Haiti. The Kenyan state historically has loved imperialism, don't depend on us for anything. Sudanese people know that. The state is stealing their gold. We are supporting RSF. So Kenya is, that violence is not just for young people in Kenya, it's in Haiti. Somali knows that because we send so-called peacekeepers to Somalia. Congo also, we also betrayed South African comrades during the apartheid years because Kenya never once offered any land for training for any of the camps. But the state was very happy to continue with supporting an apartheid regime. So our state don't depend on it for anything, really. But amidst that context, somehow, people are still reaching for other tomorrows, reaching for other suns, trying in the way that they can. I'll just see what else I have in my notes here. We also betrayed Palestine. We're probably the most fake. The state loves Zionism, I need to say, and we have so many interlinked relations with apartheid Israel, which is very, very sad. But we have some seeds, I hope, and we can also draw on this larger fire, even if some of our own spaces of organizing are always struggling. So that's the context, really. We're also not just locally and besides the imperialist lapdog work we do, we are also in cahoots with the presidents of the states in Tanzania, which just killed 3,000 people. I don't know if you saw. Between the presidents, they export assassins, so the same people abducting young people in Nairobi, abducting young people in Tanzania, abducting young people in Uganda. So the situation is dire, unfortunately. But I think I've talked a lot, in the second response to the question, maybe I can highlight some of these little seeds or the little fires that we are keeping alive, even if you're just blowing the ashes. Who keeps do you know the fires where you have to blow? Even if we are doing that, we are just trying. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you once again. The context in which Abahlali operates is also life-threatening. We are being punished for organizing outside the state, outside the oldest liberation movement in Africa, the African National Congress. We are also accused of being funded by foreign agencies that wants to destabilize our hard-won democracy. And when they say that, they do so to justify killing of Abahlali. There's no wisdom that you can get from the sheikhs. These individuals are used by white men because black excellence cannot be expected in shanty towns. So any good, brilliant, intellectual work that can be produced in shantytown is regarded as being parachuted, because these people do not have brain of their own. So we get accused of being funded, supported by foreign agencies whose intention is to destabilize our so-called hard-won democracy. So when you wipe Abahlali, then you are protecting the sovereignty of South Africa. This has been said over and over. It's been debated also in some of the parliaments in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance. It got to a point where even lawyers were scared to work or support us. You know, when you have the elephant in the room, then it becomes unimaginable even for lawyers to really want to interpret the law and do the work. Not only that, where we win cases, we were once told that this government cannot be told by the courts how to govern. Because governing means physical and muscular capability. That's how court orders meant to prohibit, prevent evictions have always been ignored, violated, because from the ANC government perspective, they cannot be told, be dictated by the courts how to govern. That is why today groups like Operation Dudulas can attack our Chapter 9 institutions with the support of the oldest liberation movement in Africa, as well as the newly formed MK Party P members. They all rally behind Operation Dudula because they cannot be told by the Constitution, by the agencies and the Chapter 9 institutions of this country how to govern. Then you can ask yourself, what is governance in Africa? In the same way as the previous speaker has contributed. Now, our members' lives have been vandalized. In many ways, this has happened in a broad daylight. Those who have been following the attack on Ekenana, for instance, the assassins will come in a broad daylight and shoot comrades in a form of a Hollywood movie style. Those who have been in Los Angeles, comrades from LA will know this. When I traveled to LA one day, I saw the big rain. It was raining. In the sunlight, there was a big rain in the sunlight. And when I look around, I realized that comrades, they were much advanced. They can make it rain if they want it to rain. But then I got to discover that there was a holy movie shooting around the corner. And I realized that my appear, as one of the steering, because I happened to be at the LA. So comrades were shot in that broad daylight, in front of children, in front of women. Those women and children are continuously suffering nightmares that I cannot even be able to describe. And I'm happy there are comrades from the Healing of Memories that I saw here. They have a great good work to do in Abahlali and many other communities who continues to be governed with violence, who continue to be raised with violence, to be engaged with violence on a daily basis. Now, the state does all of this as a form of punishment. And this conference has been articulating the punishment. We one day confronted one of the powerful politicians in that city, who's now here in Cape Town in the National Legislature, what we said to him, they must tell us our sentence. How long shall we be saving this sentence? Because we are aware that we are being punished, but we even thought prison was better because at least you have deadline. You know how long you are saving your sin. Now, in our form, it's a lifelong, permanent imprisonment. Even in a situation where houses are being built, they get built far away as a way of further pushing you out of the cities. In any area of economic opportunities, you get pushed away. So this is what we are confronted with. That's the difficult context in which we operate. Some of the leaders continue to receive death threats. There has been a situation, I think it would be good to share this. What would you do when you are told that a hit has been confirmed in your life? You get told by reliable sources, the police. They tell you who is hired to get rid of you, to eliminate you, and that you have a maximum of 2 weeks to leave. So comrades have had those situations, and it's difficult to know when death is inevitable. Do you share that with your family? Do you share that with your comrades and close friends that you may be killed at any time? What do you do? So I just want to leave it there, comrades, and say we have lost at least 25 soldiers who continue to inspire us, who continue to make us strong if we were to answer that question. But how do you survive? Because those who are gone in our eyes, they live in our memories and they continue to inspire us. We are spiritual people, and that's what has kept us going. Thank you.
I'm going to stay seated because I don't know if I can balance both. I just want to thank you all for being here, and I'm really honored to be here. As a member of the Sudanese diaspora, I often feel uncomfortable talking about Sudan because I'm not in Sudan, but here I am. I'm going to try my best. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to honor and remember the many martyrs of Sudan's ongoing revolution and the countless people in Sudan, Palestine, Kenya, the Congo, Brazil, the Caribbean, Venezuela, Tanzania, and right here in South Africa and elsewhere, who have lost their lives due to state violence, capitalism, and imperialism. So just briefly, I think a lot of people don't know much about what's happening in Sudan, so I'm going to just give a little bit of context. And this might be some repetition from yesterday, but basically a war started in April of 2023 between two factions of a military coup regime, the Sudanese Army, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which grabbed power in October of 2021 in a coup, attempting to crush a popular revolution which ended the dictatorship of Umar al-Bashir after 30 years in power. I think it's useful to begin by defining this war, which is not purely an internal power struggle or simply a proxy war of regional or superpowers, but rather an internationalized counter-revolutionary war supported by internal and external actors linked by capital, who are waging it to protect their financial and political interests. Yesterday, I traced the ways that the trade in Sudanese gold, gum arabic, which is a commodity used in candy, soft drinks, makeup. Sudan produces 80% of it, and it's the only Sudanese commodity that was exempt from US and European sanctions in place since the 90s, and then livestock as well, are fueling this war by facilitating much higher profit margins for foreign elites and their local partners than before, by diverting this trade through neighboring countries like Kenya, Chad, and Libya. So if we take this framing of an internationalized counter-revolutionary war as a point of departure, then what people are up against, in particular revolutionaries and organizers, are the internal and external forces of counter-revolution. So internally, we have the army and its allied militias that are supported by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Ukraine, and Iran. Egypt is supporting the army in an effort to protect its interests with regards to the Red Sea and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The RSF is primarily being supported by the UAE. They were formerly known as the Janjaweed, responsible for the genocide in Darfur in the early 2000s, carried out in collaboration with the army. But contrary to some analysis that portray the RSF as a non-state entity and militia gone rogue, they're part of the same state apparatus that grabbed power in the coup of 2021. They're essentially a creation of the state now intent on capturing it. The internal counter-revolution began the day that al-Bashir was ousted in April of 2019. After this revolution partially converged in a massive 1 million person sit-in in front of the military headquarters in Khartoum, but also other military headquarters across the country. Bashir was ousted, but people stayed put because their demands exceeded calls for regime change and included calls such as, quote, ending Sudan's civil wars by addressing their root causes and dismantling the current structure of governance and developing an independent judicial system. And revolutionaries stayed in place because military elites from within al-Bashir's inner circles had taken over, forming the Transitional Military Council. The backbone of this revolution are neighborhood resistance committees, about 8,000 of them across the country, but also independent farmer and labor unions, youth and feminist organizations that really brought together rural and urban demands for land reform and economic justice at the center, with decades-old struggles for justice and self-determination in Sudan's peripheries. In June of 2019, the RSF and the army dismantled the sit-in through a massacre. And then we saw the resistance committees and the more radical elements of the revolution sidelined during the formation of a transitional government in favor of civilian elites, many from the diaspora, who attempted to open Sudan up after decades of isolation due to Clinton-era sanctions to international donor funding. And the Abrams Accord is one example of that, where in exchange for normalizing relations with Israel, Sudan was taken off the US list of state sponsors of terrorism and promised $1 billion in annual financing from the World Bank amidst opposition from the public. Then the RSF and army staged the coup, in part because they were worried that companies under their control would come under civilian oversight. Military elites control over 70% of Sudan's economy. After this coup, when the external forces entered the picture, the UAE and Saudi Arabia immediately paid millions into the central bank to strengthen the coup, in part because they've invested over $27 billion in Sudanese land, real estate, and infrastructure since the 2000s, and wanted to protect their investments. The UN led peace talks that legitimized and propped up the coup leaders, whose war crimes span decades, the head of the army and the head of the RSF, framing them as potential reformists, rather than listening to the resistance committees, which called for no negotiations, no legitimacy, and no partnership with the military. And it's this lack of accountability and international diplomacy as a tool of empire, prioritizing stability over revolutionary demands, which paved the way for this war. So basically, these are the internal and external elite forces that people in Sudan are up against. If I were to put it in one nutshell, it is that what we need is simply, oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm almost done. Is what is needed is simply hands off Sudan, a slogan borrowed from our comrades in Haiti. We don't need more intervention. We just need the current forms of intervention, the resource extraction, the weapons, the high-level negotiations where perpetrators of violence trade peace for power, the material support to the warring parties to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, comrades, for laying out in such devastating detail what we're up against. I think what we do have to continue to balance in this moment is that the forces that aim to repress and kill, they've always been around and they come around, and we're in a particularly difficult moment at the moment. But I'm hoping we can speak in the second round about some of the ways in which ordinary people have organized and continue to organize to resist what you've described as quite horrific and difficult contexts. So if you can take some time now to speak through some of that. Some of the things we've tried to do when we've been meeting ongoingly around issues that can be very demoralizing is that we have tried to focus on both the analysis and understanding the context, but also ensuring that we lift up and we remember that we have always resisted. And part of the reason we're here today to listen to some of the difficulties is that we can think better together around how to organize together. So we look forward to hearing some of that.
I first want to say something that actually what you were describing reminded me of a conversation I had with a Kenyan comrade the last time I was in South Africa. And it stood out to me because the logic of it felt quite Israeli, in that I was telling her how when the Israelis want to demolish a home, they give you the choice to demolish it by your own hands, or we will charge you the cost of the bulldozer and the rent and the materials. And actually, I don't know if this is applicable to all of Kenya, but I heard something about in these mass assassination campaigns that there were families who were approached and being asked to pay for the cost of the bullets that were used to kill their loved ones. And I think there's something there about this logic, this quite naked commodification really of life. You're going to charge me for destroying my home or for killing my loved ones. And another thing to segue into what Palestinians in the West Bank, at least, are doing about repression. It's interesting to me when you say these accusations of being foreign funded, trying to ruin our hard-fought democracy. It's a bit sad that the version of that for Palestinians is we don't even have that hard-fought democracy. It's the Palestinian Authority are accusing us of being foreign funded and saying we are ruining what they came up with, and what they came up with is a mall. And just go to a cafe in Ramallah and pretend that everything is fine. But this is what we are up against, and I think what me and my comrades there are trying to deal with is this stigmatization of being politically active. And I always bring it back to women, but I think especially about women, where again to see how the Palestinian Authority is mirroring in a crude way the logic and language of the occupation. The occupation says that Palestinian mothers are not fit to be mothers because they are raising little terrorists, little snakes. Even in the South Africa ICJ court, case specifically, in the argument for how Israel was being genocidal against the Palestinians, there's so much language focusing on mothers and how we might as well kill them because they are going to be giving birth to new problems anyways. So, and the Palestinian Authority side of that is what kind of a mother is out in the streets like this, and her husband is not keeping her at home, basically, and how shameful that is. So we go against that stigmatization when we show up for each other as women in the struggle, when we welcome Palestinian prisoners home, women and men, because when we talk about this, we also reject what has come to be maybe a trend in the media when talking about Palestinians is the women and children, as if it is okay to kill the men, or as if these are the really blameless ones, spare them. When no, we want our men alive too. We see ourselves that this is an attack on the whole family. So we, I think, are good at being against that. And even there was a new interview that came out with Layla Khalid after so many years. Layla Khalid, for those who don't know, was one of the first Palestinian women to hijack a plane. She went up to the highest ranks of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the leftist party. And when we do this, and when we also, what we had were kind of committees where we would go to visit the families of prisoners on the prisoners' birthdays or for martyrs, and refusing to accept their deaths or to accept their erasure specifically. And again, I think where we would be against the Palestinian Authority here is how they didn't want us to put up graffitis of martyrs, and they didn't want us to be in such support of the freedom fighters from the refugee camps. And I think, again, this when this isn't about abolition, this panel, but I think it's interesting how the language of carcerality is also used to try to quell resistance. When, for example, we had a fighter named Abu Shuja from the Tul Karim refugee camp, and it's striking to me that in a society where well over 70% of Palestinian men have been to jail at least once. My husband and I wrote about this in the Scalawag magazine about Palestine through an abolitionist lens for those interested in more detail. But the point is that this is a society that is primed to understand that criminalization should not mean dehumanization, that it's not that we are ashamed of having been imprisoned, we are against a system that even thinks it has the right to imprison us, but that the same population can sometimes be susceptible to, how will I put this? To trying to defamation campaigns of, well, this you say he's a resistance fighter. No, he's a drug trafficker. And you know what? We're going to try to pander to the more conservative circles. He was gay too. Why not? How we are even supposed to be against resistance because this is not he's not really for resistance. He's destroying his community. And this is actually a social contagion even that we need to contain. So I think when we reject that rhetoric, when we continue to put up these posters, when we continue to visit families, when we continue to insist, no, actually, it's not It doesn't make you a bad mother to be out protesting. It's that you see everyone else's children as important as your own. You're rejecting this, how capitalism wants us to be. You know, obviously Engels talked about this beautifully in The Condition of the Working Class of England and in The Origin of the Family, about why these means of production have made it so that we're supposed to be these strict nuclear families only, easier to control, and for patriarchal relations. We reject that and we say, no, my community is my family, all the children are my children, and this is why we continue forward. And now this is when I can say the second part of the Lenin quote from his same writing about after the death of Tolstoy that I really loved, where he wrote, "We have plenty to protest, but nothing to despair about. Despair is typical of those who do not understand the causes of evil, see no way out, and are incapable of struggle. We do not belong to such classes."
So, thinking about how we keep that fire going, you know, there's so many assaults on people's bodies. These days also ecology is weaponized through this language of green transition, and under the banner of, for example, green transition, more African land is being taken. I think at least 10% of Sierra Leone or Zimbabwe is going under carbon credit so that Walmart can have a fake carbon sink, and that leads to more disenfranchisement. So there's ecological assaults, they're all linked, political assaults, whether in Kenya, because IMF says to be legitimate, you need to have elections and good governance, then there's these fake elections which are not genuinely representative of the will of the people. We also then celebrate things like Kenya becoming, well, a special NATO ally. So there are these political assaults, there's economic assaults, and we talked about the finance bill last year that people were protesting. But amidst all of this, in the small corners that people have, in the big corners that people have, they're responding in diverse ways. For me, one way I'm encouraged is young people who are on the streets last year had signs saying, "We don't want death slavery." And for me, that was more also critical because in Kenya, we don't talk about enslavement. We don't talk about Africans who are stolen from this continent, taken across the Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. So to just put this word back, to draw a long history between IMF, disenfranchisement, and chattel slavery, for me that was very critical and is one mode of resisting. Every day in the news, there's communities saying, no, we are not being kicked off our land for gold, for lithium, for carbon credits. Every day, there's even legally, people are trying on all fronts to do what they can. In a book called Decolonial Ecology, I think Malcolm Ferdinand is from, sorry? Yes. And he asks, are these frontal challenges? So for me, I think, are we making challenges that are really facing the monster? They may not seem like it, but I think hopefully there's some way we can move forward. I'll also, sorry, I'm stealing her phone. I'm trying to look for my phone. Some inspiration I also think back to is in the late 40s, it was a year of strikes across Africa. Senegalese railway workers boycotted. The West African railway workers said, we are not working for months on end. There was a workers' strike in Nairobi, a dock workers' strike in Mombasa. So I try and think back also to that time where colonialism was slightly paralyzed. You know, the road infrastructure is paralyzed, Africans are not working. And that was a lot of, I would think, the seed for anti-colonial struggles in the Mau Mau and elsewhere. So I try and think about what was happening then and what can we learn now? And even just by way of concluding, no resolution. I also feel a bit, hopefully, I also hope I have no room for despair, but I feel a bit despairing. But there's a poem by Agostinho Neto from Angola, and in my very poor translation, sorry, I think it says, me ajuda, na alta noite do rumo sem nome. So in the dark night, in the high night, or on a road with no name. And I think that's where we are. We're in this high night, on a road with no name. But he also says in the poem, ainda eu sou crente, I'm still a believer. Yeah.
Sometimes when we meet in these international platforms, we often become very international and things become so abstract. In our movement, we have a very good concept. We call it Abahlali. It's kind of a pride spirit of belonging to the human family. Ubuntu, you are because I am. So that's our politics. It's deeply rooted in the spirit of Ubuntu. Now, one of the comrades said one day, this terminology, your imperialism, capitalism, and so on, cannot be understood by ugogo nomkhulu ekhaya. No, the grandees don't understand these things. And of course, they don't eat, doesn't put food on the table. And he said the better thing to show people that we can actually touch and taste capitalism, imperialism, and racism is by the way of picking the chancellor. Because the chancellor is representing those institutions. You're not going to go to Belgium and look for the UN offices and so on. It's impossible. Someone is representing the IMF here. It could be that building, it could be that office, it could be that individual. Before we crack our head, we're not going to go to New York and go look for the Wall Streets and all the, the stuff that confuses us here. There is somebody that the system has entrusted in our midst. So you kick them here, their mother suffers in New York. Sometimes we have to be realistic. How we've been going on in Abahlali, it's, of course, we've tried many tricks, but we are surviving today because we subscribe to the spirit of Ubuntu. Before we make our demands, we make a very clear distinction and definition of Ubuntu. And if we spend a lot of time engaging in that politics of who we are, we define ourselves before somebody else from somewhere else defines us. And that is very important to us. Because if we don't do that, we would have been able to build a very good bunch of hooligans. Yeah? Because we're dealing with angry people, people who have been frustrated, people who carry deep scars. It's easy to create a bunch of extra hooligans who will do exactly what the system does to us. So these are not easy things. So as we organize, but we make sure that the platforms and the spaces that we formulate in our movement are spaces of joy, are spaces of hope, are spaces of dignity. Those of you who have been to Abahlali General Assemblies, we hold monthly General Assemblies. There are the places of entertainment. They are spiritual spaces. They are spaces of culture. You know, as we were closing for the year, comrades were saying, but February is very far to come back and meet you because you are my family. The strength of me, what keeps me going is because of you. Now, if leaders do not call for these general assemblies, it's members that instruct us, you better call us. Not that we want to see you as leaders, but we have created a bond that has really glued us. That's the art of organizing that has built a bond in comrades. And forget the external forces. And that is very important for us. So it's what we call the living politics, because we do a lot of popular education, but we've also have a very powerful women's league in Abahlali, a very powerful space for women's empowerment, which have made the movement so strong. And we have the youth league as well. Now there's an uncle that is telling me women's league, youth league is not enough. We are the children's league. I know Comrade Jarrett has tried to develop children through CHOSA, but I mean, the comrades have nagged me to say by the time they become 40 years, they will be revolutionaries. If we not starting to groom them now, then we are missing the opportunity. So what has kept us is courage, is try to be honest to one another. By honest, I mean, when we engage with the politicians and they lie to us, we go back to comrades and say exactly those lies. We don't change the story and try to look or to be heard good. Lie is a lie, so that it does not frustrate me as a leader, it frustrates us all. That's where we develop action out of that anger and frustration. Because if only one man is angry, and then you have to take action, you're much alone, unless you make everybody angry, so that everybody sees the reason to get into the street. So these are some of the tactics that we have used, which have really kept us going. But some comrades here have made a significant contribution in building our cadreship. I mean, we have a comrade from Ochisimani who are here, who are really have been contributing so much. And that is why the alliance I spoke about, but also solidarity becomes so important. We have been built, groomed by many of you in South Africa and beyond. We are part of a global communities. It's very impressive that people in the chefs understand that. We stand in solidarity in many ways with different communities, because now we understand how deep the struggle can be. We are so connected with the comrades in Palestine, and we do action out of deep heart. Distance is no longer, geography is no longer an issue, because that's how deep the pain can be. Now, these are the conversations that were not in discussion in the shanty towns, because a lot of people think, when people meet, they discuss hunger and starvation. They have no politics. They don't care about the world. They care about, what is before them, what troubled them the most. We have moved from that culture. In every Abahlali General Assembly, it begins with the Internationale. That's how deeply we are connected to you in your dark, confined corner. The Internationale. Before we come to Nkosi Sigelela, thank you.
So I just wanted to start by saying that the war in Sudan is partly this violent. I mean, it's produced the world's largest humanitarian displacement and hunger crisis in a country, I always have to say this, in a country that could easily feed itself and the entire region, in part because of how powerful the revolution was. Not only because of what Sudanese elites feared, but also because of what their foreign partners feared in terms of the domino effect that the revolution could have had in the region. So the time of the revolution, there were longer worker strikes, like the longest worker strikes in Sudan's history, boycotts, communities got mining companies out of their, regions. It was a really inspiring time. And so I mentioned the resistance committees earlier, which formed part of the backbone of the revolution, alongside unions and other groups. And these committees are neighborhood, consensus-based, non-hierarchical collectives that developed in direct opposition to the popular committees that the former regime created to infiltrate and extend its power and reach to the neighborhood level. They have coordinating committees at various city, district, and state levels. Most emerged in 2013 during protests against IMF-recommended austerity measures. Beyond protests, they've also served as an organizing vehicle for flood relief efforts, COVID prevention, and they mobilized against government land grabs. As I mentioned earlier, the Saudis and Emiratis, by the time the war started, controlled more Sudanese land than all of Sudan's large domestic investors combined. They also crucially drafted revolutionary charters proposing a decentralized governing structure, what Abdel Salim Mindas describes as a process of occupying the institutions of power from the bottom levels to the top by localizing, democratizing, and diffusing this power through local and state councils, executive and judicial structures. And drafting these charters was very tedious. Organizers held long consultative sessions at the state level that sometimes lasted 10 hours, discussing each point, sentence, and word, debating every opinion. When they reached 70% consensus, they moved on to the next point. While incredibly powerful, one of the weaknesses of the proposal was that it included compromises with the state. As one organizer put it, it lacked a revolutionary theory of the state and of the struggle, and demoted their own role to exercising pressure on existing powers and systems rather than being organizers for a new system. When the war began, emergency response rooms developed out of these 8,000 resistance committees, and they're leading relief efforts right now in the face of a barely present international aid response. Only, I think, 25% of the aid response has been funded. They're organizing communal kitchens, driving ambulances, coordinating evacuations and protection activities, setting up ad hoc emergency clinics, rape crisis centers, converting defunct schools into shelters. About 12 million people have been displaced. Repairing and restoring public services like water and electricity, retrieving and burying dead bodies. One room coordinated with a pharmacy. They bought up all of the medicines in the pharmacy and have been giving it out to people for free. They're organizing learning activities for some of the 19 million children that are out of school. There are also agricultural response rooms focused on growing food. And the volunteers of these rooms are targeted by both parties. Some have been killed, tortured, imprisoned. Women volunteers have experienced sexual violence from RSF soldiers, partly because they pose a threat to the legitimacy of continued military rule and power as they run a country in the absence of a state. but they've also been forced to move away from the deliberately slow process of building revolutionary alternatives to the current military state towards the rapid response mode of putting out fires. And then finally, an often overlooked element of the revolutionary organizing on the ground is the resistance coming from the rural sector. I think 60 to 80% of Sudanese people rely on agriculture, at least partly, to make a living. And I think there's an urban bias in terms of how we've been looking at sort of resistance in Sudan. So I want to highlight the work of the Marxist, Leninist, Jazeera and Managil Farmers Alliance. In the part of the country that I'm from, it's the heartland, a delta between the White and the Blue Nile called the Jazeera, which is doing critical work during this war. They're a member of the Via Campesina. They launched a We Must Plant campaign last year, through which they've distributed vegetable seeds to thousands of families. Beyond allowing people to feed themselves, the alliance is enabling Sudanese farmers and farm workers to stay on land and to return to it when the risk of land grabs by foreign and domestic elites is very high, especially once the guns are silenced, even through mechanisms such as food aid, right, where US food aid is explicitly aimed at undermining the local production of grain in order to open up new markets for US agribusiness and opportunities for US private investors to invest in Sudanese land. And so here, I think I just wanted to say, we have to understand why are Sudanese people hungry in a country that could easily feed itself. And that has to do with decades of neoliberal restructuring recommended and supported by the IMF and the World Bank, Gulf Arab investments in land, Canadian mining companies forcibly displacing people off of land, right? All co-produced, of course, with Sudanese elites. So when you see images of starving Black bodies on the front page of the New York Times, I want you to think about that context. So finally, I'm just going to say about the role of the diaspora. I'm with the Sudan Solidarity Collective. Among other things, we support the Emergency Response Rooms and Farmers Alliance. You can go to sudansolidarity.com to support them. I think the role of the diaspora can often at best be overbearing, where we take up too much space in defining solutions, and at worst counter-revolutionary and interventionist. And our comrades on the ground right now are asking us to support them in confronting the external counter-revolutionary forces in ways that support rather than undermine their organizing. So we know war is big business, right, for local and international elites. So in doing research for a pension plan divestment campaign at my university in Toronto, we discovered that some of the same weapons manufacturing companies supplying the Israeli occupation forces are also supplying the United Arab Emirates, which supports the RSF in Sudan as it commits genocide in Darfur, and the Rwandan Defense Forces implicated in the war and 29-year plunder of the Congo, which allowed us to expand the mandate to include divesting from companies implicated in Sudan and Congo as well, while keeping Palestine at the center of this campaign, which narrowly garnered the support of 53% of our faculty, so it succeeded. In doing research on why Colombian mercenaries are fighting alongside the RSF in Darfur, we discovered that a top Emirati official had an affair with a wealthy Colombian entrepreneur and personal trainer based in Dubai. I know you can't make this shit up. And then appointed her to run some of Abu Dhabi's foreign affairs, which facilitated a contract with private Colombian mercenaries who have been training and supporting the RSF. And this allowed us to then work with Colombian comrades to pressure their government into opening an official inquiry into this link, which they recently did. And then finally, we know Canadian sterling, yeah. We have to celebrate these small victories, you know. We know Canadian sterling rifles and Strike armored vehicles are being used by the RSF to commit genocide in Darfur through the same loophole in Canadian law that allows Canadian weapons to be diverted through the US to Israel. And so now we're working with Palestinian activists to try to close this loophole. All this to say that this network of corporate murderers profiting off of our people's suffering and death is intimately connected across borders and states, which means that our organizing against them should be too. Thank you.
Down with corporate murderers, down. Let's open up for some questions. Thank you so much to the panelists, but I'm sure we have a number of questions in the room, so we'll take 3 or 4. I've got Peter here, comrade there, and comrade there. Okay.
Just can I just wait for the translation to be online? We good? Okay. So yeah, so firstly, Nisrin, thank you so much what you're doing with the Sudan Solidarity Coalition Collective. I can't remember what the last letter is. I think we have actually corresponded before, Peter from University of the Western Cape here. But it has been extraordinarily difficult to, so it has been thanks, Ruthie. It has been very, very difficult to organize, in my experience, anything in solidarity with Sudan and South Africa. I think we have to have a discussion among South Africans why that has been the case. When we have people from Sudan here, they are often refugees and amongst the most marginalized. When it has come up, and this is and I really salute your hands-off slogan, because when it has come up, it has been focused on the spectacular and horrifying violence of the RSF and the role of the UAE in supporting them. And similarly, we see that when people talk about what's going on in the DRC, it mostly focuses on the actions of M23, the Alliance du Fleuve. And in the DRC, Tshisekedi's regime, in Sudan, the Port Sudan military regime get a free ride. Okay, this is understandable to me, because when the RSF leaves pools of blood visible from space, you know, making them the focus seems logical. But as somebody who has spoken so eloquently about the need to support the people on the ground and what they're actually doing, what do you say about, you know, where do you about this? Because I mean, I'm torn, because on the one hand, getting any attention is better than nothing, but I'm really torn by this question of how attention is given to either DRC or Sudan.
Primeiro, reforçar a conversa de manhã, porque o projeto tem que ser internacionalista, né? As armas que matam na Palestina, matam no Sudão, matam no Brasil, e isso exige esse internacionalismo. Sem o internacionalismo, a gente não vai conseguir fazer esse enfrentamento.
So first of all, I just wanted to restate the importance of what we've mentioned earlier in the earlier section about the importance and the necessity of our struggle being internationalist, because the weapons that are killing in Palestine are the same ones that are killing in Brazil, in Sudan, in Kenya.
Eu vou fazer 2 perguntas.
I'm going to ask 2 questions.
A primeira para todas, como frente a esse genocídio, né, essa continuidade do genocídio, vocês enxergam e avaliam a produção de memória como um instrumento de resistência, né?
The first question is for all of y'all. In the face of genocide, how do you assess the work around protecting memory in the face of genocide?
E saudar um instrumento de memória e resistência lançado hoje.
And I want to shout out to one instrument of resistance and memory that was launched today, the book. Abahlali's book.
E a outra pergunta é para Maishri. Maishri. Sim. Eu não sei se eu entendi quando ela falou de, a partir de mortes, de violência, surgir resistência. E eu queria dialogar com isso, porque no Brasil existe um educador popular que afirma que o poder brota da dor. E essa minha pergunta vem me inquietado. Será que o poder só brota da dor? E eu dialogo e gostaria de ouvir um pouco você, porque mães que tiveram seus filhos mortos pela violência policial no Rio de Janeiro reproduzem e dão depoimentos que só vieram para a luta depois que perdeu os seus filhos. E isso é uma dor intensa, porque é uma reprodução, ou seja, né, de novo nesse corpo da mulher preta, né? E elas começam a se perguntar: por que eu não vim antes? Por que eu não vim antes?
And the second question regards what you've talked about, perhaps the critique about the expectation that when the people are in the kind of in the deepest in their pain, that's when resistance emerges. And so there is a Brazilian popular educator who currently says that the struggle is born out of pain. And I have been thinking and asking myself that question, is that really true? And mothers who have lost children and family members to state violence, it's recurrent in their testimony that once they have lost their children, they then join the movement against state violence. And they are the ones also asking themselves, why did I only join the movement after I have lost my child? Why didn't I do it before? So the question was regarding the issue around the source of when the struggle comes from.
Two more and then we'll come to the panel.
Boa tarde a todos, né? Eu vou repetir uma informação que eu passei ontem. O Brasil é um país que mata entre 4 e 5 mil pessoas negras por ano.
I'm going to repeat something I said yesterday. Brazil is a country that kills 4,000 to 5,000 people every year.
Nos últimos 20 anos, isso tem sido uma corrente ininterrupta de pessoas morrendo.
In the last 20 years, it has been an interrupted process of people being killed.
Para aqueles que escapam, o Brasil oferece o encarceramento. São 700 mil pessoas presas nesse momento, 90% pessoas negras.
And to the survivors, Brazil offers incarceration. It's 700,000 people incarcerated currently in the country.
E quando eu iniciei no ativismo anticarcerário, eu escutei uma pessoa dizendo que para cada adolescente morto pela polícia, nasce uma mãe abolicionista.
And when I started my struggle in the anti-prison movement, I heard someone say that for each adolescent, each teenager that's killed, a mother is born to abolitionism.
Eu procurei essa pessoa para conhecer mais, porque ela me impactou com essa fala. E aí ela começou a me ensinar que ela me apresentou um grupo que estava tentando apresentar para as pessoas uma estratégia de sobrevivência dentro e fora do cárcere.
And I reached out to the person who had said that, which really impacted me. And I was presented to a group that was working to find strategies to work strategies to organize survival inside and outside of prison.
E essa estratégia que ela estava apresentando, que o grupo dela apresenta, era uma condensação, uma mistura de solidariedade, acolhimento e amor.
And the strategy that they were working around was a blend of solidarity, love, and embrace.
E essa instituição se chama Amparar, é a instituição na qual hoje eu faço parte. E aí eu gostaria de pedir a vocês a oportunidade de ouvir Raída Alves, que é a fundadora dessa organização, dizer um pouco para a gente como ela organizou isso tudo e de que forma ela amparou a mim e mais muitas outras pessoas que passaram pelo cárcere e os seus familiares também.
And the founder of this institution called Amparar, which was the one who embraced me, is here. Her name is Raída Alves, and I would like to request an opportunity for her to talk about how she has, with her camaraderies, devised these strategies and make this institution and the struggle happen.
Boa tarde a todos e todas. Estou aqui nessa caminhada muito emocionada na África, né? E falar de abolicionismo faz parte da nossa vida. Quando tudo se inicia, em 1990, quando tive meu filho afetado pelo Estado, preso aos 14 anos de idade.
I am very moved to be here in an abolitionist space in Africa, and I'm feeling really touched, and will tell the story of my son who was impacted by the state, and he was incarcerated at the age of 14.
Na década de 90,
in the 1990s,
no estado de São Paulo vivia período pós-redemocratização e pós-promulgação do Estatuto da Criança e Adolescente, o ECA.
In the 1990s, it was just years after the process of democratization of the country, as well as the creation of the Institute in Defense of Adolescents and Children.
Apesar disso, o cenário era de violações de direitos e tortura.
And despite that, the scenario was one of violation of rights and torture.
Contra os adolescentes,
against the teenagers,
privados de liberdade,
who had been deprived from freedom and were deprived from freedom.
Isso fez com que familiares, principalmente suas mães,
and that has made that family members, particularly mothers,
protagonista de ações políticas,
became protagonists of political actions,
para que pudessem,
so that
minimamente garantir os direitos básicos de seus entes aprisionados.
So that they could minimally ensure that the basic rights of their incarcerated people were safeguarded.
São mães que sofrem violência sangrando na alma.
So the mothers who feel the violence and feel that bleeding in their souls.
E cujas lembranças devem ser recuperadas.
And whose memories must be rescued, recuperated.
Porque são mulheres negras,
because these are black women,
pobres,
poor women,
periféricas,
from the peripheries,
que são vistas em uma sociedade anti-negritude,
who are seen in an anti-black society,
como fábricas,
as factories,
de produzir marginais,
of producing marginals.
Na palavra dos evangélicos, de alguns evangélicos no Brasil,
of producing marginal criminals, in the words of some evangelicals in Brazil.
Sobre tipo específico de maternidade, não é a maternidade ideal, projetada pela publicidade.
So they're talking about a kind of mothering and motherhood, which is not the real motherhood we experience, which is projected by mainstream media.
Enaldecida por novelas e filmes de água com açúcar.
A type of mothering and motherhood that's displayed on soap operas as it is all sweet and sweet waters.
Também não se trata de maternidade comum.
It's also not a common way of mothering and motherhood.
Que pode ser entendida com aquela em que as relações entre mães e filhos
which can generally be understood as that which is the relationship between mothers and the children
desenrolam sem problemas graves,
unfold without any intercurrents, unfold without any issues.
Aqui se fala da maternidade vivenciada na diversidade.
Here we are talking about diverse ways of living, experiencing mothering.
Sem seguir os padrões,
without following standards, established standards.
São histórias de dor.
These are histories and stories of pain.
De luta.
Of struggle.
Acima de tudo.
Above all.
De coragem.
Stories of courage.
Coragem.
Courage.
De enfrentar a polícia.
Courage to confront the police.
O Estado.
And the state.
Os olhos preconceituosos da sociedade e da imprensa.
And the judgmental eyes of society and mainstream media.
Olhar sobre as memórias de história, olhar para
to look into memories and their histories, it is to look at
Mod Hawkins, Amparar, que nasce na década de 90, qual é um país, porém, com os mesmos incômodos das mães, no qual trouxe uma relação com significado de lutas.
Perdi a primeira parte.
Okay. Nasce na década de 90.
He was born in the 1990s.
Ai, desculpa, gente, estou muito emocionada.
I'm sorry, I'm very moved.
Cada qual em um país.
Each one in a different country.
Porém, com os mesmos incômodos das mães.
However, with the same shared
no qual trouxe uma relação com significado de lutas.
With the same shared sense of trouble that they were experiencing and the shared sense of struggle.
Autênticos.
Authentic sense of struggle.
Sendo o primeiro olhar.
Being the first one to look at.
Meu, olhar para o outro e olhar o quanto querem nos descartar e nos tornar matáveis.
And to look at one another, this coming together, looking at one another and trying to shield ourselves from the gaze that wants nothing from us than to render us disposable.
Essas mulheres carregam todo o fardo de responsabilidade de seus lares e o preconceito de uma sociedade que a descarta e criminaliza.
These women carry on their shoulders the weights of a sense of disposability that's putting their existence into threat.
Marginaliza como as mulheres do útero podre.
And that marginalizes women with a rotten womb.
Portanto, Amparar assume o papel de realizar um trabalho de construção da sensibilização política.
And therefore, Amparar, which is the organization, emerges with a mission to politicize the sensitivities and the sensibilities of the women.
Dessas mulheres.
Of these women.
Discutindo.
Organizing conversations around.
Como o contexto no qual se insere.
The context within which they are.
Tem raízes históricas.
The context that they come from has historical roots.
Nas relações de poder.
In relations of power.
Colocadas atualmente.
That are being mobilized currently.
Não Amparar. Os momentos de formação coletiva. Busca enfatizar.
So currently at the institution, the moments of collective gathering seek to emphasize
que o cárcere,
that incarceration,
e o sistema penal,
and the penal system,
assim como a situação na qual,
as well as
essas mulheres se encontram,
the situations in which
e têm raízes na escravidão.
Are rooted in slavery.
É como uma escravidão moderna.
It is like a modern type of slavery.
E que as mães também
And the mothers also
Tem ligação com as histórias das mães escravizadas,
are directly linked in their ancestry to the enslaved mothers
que tinham seus filhos e filhas sequestradas,
who had their children kidnapped.
que as famílias já trazem consigo fardo
And
de um suposto fracasso,
and the families carry with them an imposed burden of supposed failure,
que resulta em uma grande culpabilização,
which results in a great sense of blaming.
A culpa.
Blaming.
Pelas prisões de seus filhos e filhas,
because of the experience of their sons and daughters,
e pelas abordagens policiais,
and also for the police approach to them,
que enfrentam pelas mortes de familiares,
that they experience through the experience of the killings and the death of their family members.
Muitas outras situações que enfrentamos no Brasil também. Porém, ao participarem das atividades da Amparar,
so when these women participate in the collective activities of Amparar,
é possível
it's possible
observar
to note
quanto essas mulheres
how these women
vão mudando
change over time,
suas formas
the ways in which
de pensar,
they think,
e percebendo que este fardo do fracasso não é culpa das famílias.
They come to understand that the burden of accusations of failure is not the fault of the families.
Elas vão compreendendo,
and they understand
aos poucos,
slowly,
como a colonização,
how colonization
e a branquitude
and white supremacy
são responsáveis
are responsible for
pela construção
the construction
de uma sociedade
of a society,
punitiva,
punitive society,
desigual,
unequal society,
assim como o capitalismo e a desigualdade,
as well as result of capitalism and its inequalities.
Intensificam
and they intensify
a precariedade,
the precarity,
e promovem
and promote
vulnerabilidades específicas na vida das pessoas periféricas.
And promote specific vulnerabilities in the lives of people from the peripheries.
Por favor, eu peço uma saudação calorosa para essa mulher incrível.
Thank you so much. It's always not only moving, but important when we can have spaces where where everybody feels welcome to say what they need to say and take the time to do it. So thank you so much for that. We're going to go back to the panel for a round of comments, and we might take one or two more short questions.
Thank you so much for sharing these thoughts. It's very painful, but it's very necessary. It's what is at the core of what we are trying to do here. To answer about the idea of why did I join the movement, for example, after my child was incarcerated or killed, why not before? It speaks to me something in Palestine. I have been to more funerals than I would wish. When a chant that is always spoken at these funerals, when it's usually a young Palestinian man, usually around the age of 14, 15, maybe, who's been killed, and we're marching in the street with his body, and we see his mother. There's always a chant that Palestinians say. It's Yem Shahid Niyalik Yaret Immi Badalik. And it means, oh, mother of the martyr, I envy you. I wish it was my mother instead of yours.